welcome here. I want to talk to you today about working with faux fur yarn and also my experience making a KayteDids pattern. If you're not familiar with who KayteDids is, she is a viral crochet designer. Her content went really popular on TikTok last year, I guess it was, or maybe it was 2020. She was making beanies with her knitting machine, the circular knitting machine, and using this rainbow yarn. And her videos went viral and her patterns are super popular. And they're simple, easy to follow patterns, really well done. And I thought I would use one of her patterns and put a bit of my own twist on it. And I'll show you exactly what I did. Before I get started, I wanted to say I am wearing my Maker of Happy Things t-shirt. This is available in my Etsy shop. My sister and I started an Etsy shop in 2020, so it's going on 2 years old now. We sell t-shirts, hoodies, stickers. All of the artwork is my sister's original designs. Some of them are concepts that I give her, but she is the artist, the true digital art mastermind behind our Etsy shop. She does an amazing job, really cute stuff. And I actually just shipped out an order this morning. So the t-shirts are available on my Etsy shop if that's something you're interested in. So let's dive in. We are going to first review the yarn, and then we'll review the pattern, and then I'll talk about any changes I made to the pattern to get the look that I have for the animals, stuffies. I guess they're not really animals, but the stuffies that I made. And I made 5 of them for Christmas this year, and it's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot, but it's good. So I used Fable Fur yarn by We Crochet for all of the stuffies that I made. This is a super bulky weight yarn. It is 71 yards per 100 grams. So they recommend using an M through Q size hook. Not gonna lie, I never pay attention to the letter number on my hook. I used a P is 10 millimeters, which is what I have here. So, you know, anything from, I would say, a 6.5 to 10 millimeter hook would all work depending on what density of a material you want to create. It is 100% polyester. Is very soft, extremely soft yarn. Absolutely love it. I love how it worked up as a stuffy, and I recently started using this extra that I had to make a little blanket just to see how I like it as a fabric. Maybe I'll turn it into a cardigan. We'll see. But as you can see, the fabric is nice and dense, and it looks very fluffy and very soft. So the top question I hear from people who want to work with faux fur yarn or really fluffy yarn like this is, how do you know where to put your hook? I can't see the stitches. And you're right, you cannot see the stitches. It's extremely difficult to count them. And the smaller the hook that you use, the smaller your stitches, the harder it is to count them, which is why you really ought to use a stitch marker and a row counter as you're working with this yarn in order to stay on track with your project. However, instead of trying to put your hook through the top 2 loops in the crochet stitch like we normally would, it's much easier and better in this circumstance to actually make your stitches between the stitches. So you can put your finger through the yarn and the finished work, and you can see where to put your hook, and you just put it between the stitches instead of through the top loops. That makes it so much easier. Overall, I thought my experience with the yarn was spectacular. I am absolutely thrilled with how each stuffy came out. They're all unique and they're beautiful. However, I did find some slight discrepancies in the yarn that I wasn't thrilled about. However, it's not enough that would keep me from using the yarn again if I felt like it was right for the project. So some of those discrepancies would be, I felt like not all of the colors had the same amount of yardage in them, and I'm not sure why that would be. So I ordered 4 balls of the yarn for each stuffy. However, I ran out of yarn when I made the black one and ended up going to my local craft store to get their store brand faux fur yarn to finish him up. And at a glance, you can't really see, but if you look up close and you can feel there's a texture difference there. And I don't know why it is that the black yarn had less. I wondered if maybe it was due to, it could have been that I just didn't do good keeping up with how many stitches or rows I made, and I used more yarn. But I also felt like the yarn was a little bit thicker and a little bit heavier than the other brands, and I wondered if that had to do with the dye, because the black yarn left marks on my fingers. So maybe because the dye was so dense, it made the yarn heavier, so the machine sensed it was at 100 grams before it was at 71 yards. I'm not sure where the discrepancy came in, but that was an issue for me, that I felt like the black skeins of yarn had less yarn than the other colors. Now this is the black one that I made for my son. He's all dressed up because he's a superhero. But I wanted to use this to show you some of the slight discrepancies I had with the yarn. Discrepancy is not the right word. Issues. The tail, if you can see, the tail does not stay weaved in very well. This is not the entire tail. This is part of it that has come undone. And I need to re-weave in some of the tails on this one. They came out pretty quick. So overall, very happy with how these guys came out. This is the one where I did have to pick up some extra yarn to finish it. And then the horns and details on these stuffies were all just random blanket yarns from my local craft store. I've increased the exposure here on my camera to try and show you the difference between the two yarns. You can see right about here is where I ran out of the Fable Fur. This really dense black is the Fable Fur. This here, I'd say it's a lighter black, if that's possible. It's more of a gray black. This is the Hobby Lobby faux fur yarn that I grabbed at our closest craft store that I could get what I needed. So it's slightly different. If you can't tell in the video, but it's a different texture. This yarn was 3 different plies, and this is a single ply of the faux fur yarn. Theirs came like 3 strands twisted together, which was a little bit different. I also have these eyes, these holographic big giant eyes for these guys that I found on Etsy, and I will link to those below. I really had so much fun making these, and they had such a wide variety of colorways for the faux fur yarn. They didn't have as many, say, fantasy colors as I would have liked. They had a light blue and a light pink, and the rest of them were more realistic colors. There were varying shades of browns and grays, a black one with white tips. They're all very beautiful, and I think all of them would look fantastic worked up. And the extra pieces for each of them were, I just went to my local craft store or went stash diving to find extra yarns to use for all of the accessories. And any leftover yarn from this project I'm going to be turning into little jellyfish plushies, I think is what I'll do with it. I definitely recommend using a craft glue that dries soft on your ends, because I have had to re-weave in my ends on several of these. Not all of them, so I must have done a better job on some of them than others, but it's a thought. It would be a good addition, especially if you're giving it or selling it. I really loved working with KayteDids pattern. I felt like overall it was extremely easy to read. It was clear, it was simple. There were a few things that I didn't love about the pattern that I felt made it difficult to get started. Namely, exact yardage for the pattern is not listed. So she didn't say how much yarn she used. She just said, I think it was 1 ball of red heart, which wasn't using a red heart super saver. And a lot of the advertising for the pattern shows it made with blanket yarn. Oh, I did the Vinnie the Boy Dino pattern. And a lot of the advertising on her social medias and on Facebook and things show each pattern made in a blanket style yarn or like a jumbo super bulky styles of yarn. However, there wasn't a lot of information in the pattern. There was no information in the pattern at all on how to make it with the bigger yarn. There wasn't a recommended hook size, there wasn't a recommended gauge or anything like that. And while that's not make or break for a pattern, it would have been really helpful because I really struggled to know how much yarn to order since there was no real yardage listed. I just had to guess, and I would not have had enough yarn. I ended up adjusting the pattern and doing fewer rows than written in order to make sure I had enough yarn, and I still ran out of yarn with the black one, even though I ordered what I estimated would have been enough based on how many yards are in the ball of yarn that she indicated that she used. So I think it would have been very helpful if the actual yardage had been listed and a recommended hook size for different types of yarn, especially since it's advertised frequently as made with a super bulky or a bulky blanket style yarn. I made a few TikToks and social media posts about the different versions of the pattern that I did. In one version of the pattern, I made a unicorn, and it had a large twirly unicorn horn like this. I have not weaved in my ends on this. This is just an example. And I had a lot of people ask, well, how do you make the twisted unicorn horn? I have 2 here, and I'm going to go ahead and do a really quick tutorial on how to make it here. It's a very simple process, but I'll be doing a full-length tutorial video. Hopefully I'll be able to get that finished in time to link in the description below, more detailed how to make that. So it's occurred to me that including a tutorial in this video is a bit much. This video is already long enough. So I will have a full tutorial for how to make the twirly unicorn horn in a separate video that will be going live at the same time. So it will be linked below in the comments or the description of this video. So you can just hop over there and watch that and learn how to make the twirly unicorn horn. For all of them, all of the stuffies, I only used the pattern that was included in, like parts that were included in the pattern. So for the kitten, the ears, I just did spikes that were the written spikes pattern. And it was the same with the unicorn. The ears are just the spike pattern. I did do some of the spots. I did a belly on some of them, but not on all of them. Some of them I felt like it didn't look right with the belly. Some of them did look right with the belly. It just, depended. What else? The only difference is I put stripes on one of them. My younger son wanted his to be a stripey dino, and I gave him eyebrows, which makes him look so concerned. This poor little dino looks super worried, and all that was is just a little stitch right above the eye, and then I knotted it on the outside. Like I just stitched a few times and then knotted both ends together on the outside, and then just kind of twisted it and tucked the knot inside the head so that it was invisible. You didn't see the knot. but I think it's a super cute expression. Either way, my kids absolutely loved these stuffies. They were so excited. They knew I was making them. There was no way I could keep it a secret because they see me working on it, but they never saw them finished. They only saw the disassembled pieces. They had no mental image of what they were going to be. And I could not think of a good way to wrap them for Christmas. So I just kind of stuck them out under the tree, and they came running in Christmas morning, and they were there, and that was the first thing they got. And it was like oohs and ahs, and they got to cuddle with them while our family read our traditional Christmas story before we opened presents and all this sort of thing. So it was really, really sweet, and it was quite an experience. And they all love them. They absolutely adore them. Oh, one other thing that I did differently. Which one was it? The cat. I didn't put whiskers on it to be a cat because I tried a bunch of different things. I did the cat muzzle smaller. That's one thing I did was I made the cat muzzle a little bit smaller than the written pattern, like just a few, like it starts with a chain, and I just shortened it. I did a few less stitches in my chain, so it had more of a pointed face. And what was the other thing? I didn't put whiskers on it. I couldn't figure out a good way to put whiskers on it to where they looked like they were supposed to be there. I felt like no matter what I tried black, I tried using the same color, the accent color that I used for her belly, and it didn't seem to matter what I did. The whiskers just didn't look right. My daughter says it's a bear with a long tail. So it's an animal that's open to interpretation, I guess. So, I mean, I don't know. Either way, they really loved them. They have. Oh, I made a big bow for the cat, and all I did was I chained 5 or 6, I'm not sure, and just did a bunch of rows, seamed it together, and then wrapped the yarn around it to cinch it, made a bow. I'll show you a close-up of that here in a little bit. So this is a TikTok I made of the process of making this cat, unidentified animal. Follow me on TikTok if you want sneak peeks of what's coming in videos. I did play around with the hook size. The first one I did was the unicorn, and I used an 8.5 millimeter hook for it, and it came out enormous. And I don't know if I made a mistake in the pattern and did too many rows, because I really struggled to count my rows. Highly recommend, if you're working with faux fur yarn and trying to make amigurumi, use a row counter and a stitch counter, because it is so hard to see your stitches. You'll definitely need something to help you. So take some time to really see what's going on there. Count your stitches as you go. Use a row counter to make sure you're on track. Anyways, I don't know if I just completely lost track of my rows or if it was the size of the hook or what, but it is enormous. It is pretty much the size of my almost 2-year-old. Her birthday's in a couple weeks. So I adjusted. One of the other things I was concerned about was I felt like there was a little too much space between the stitches with the 8.5 millimeter hook. So I went down to a 6.5 millimeter hook, which is what I use for all the other ones. The stitches are much denser. There's not as much finger poking through room between the stitches. I think you could easily go down another step to say a 5.5 millimeter hook. If you did, I would recommend using, say, an inline hook like a Susan Bates hook, because they have a deeper throat. I think a shallow hook like a boy or even a furls wouldn't grasp the thick yarn very well, and it would be challenging if you used that small of a hook with this thick of a yarn, but it would definitely get you those really dense fabric, really dense stitches. So those are just a few thoughts on on that. Thank you for joining me today in our chat about plushies. I hope you like this video, I hope you subscribe, and I will see you next week.